I didn't even know how to review this book because it left me very bruised. And bruised by meaning it would throw me down, pick me up, and throw me down again. It's a historical fiction that I knew nothing about, and I love these kind of books. And this one has sat with me for several weeks before I could even review it. But as you know, I'm Boozy Bee. Every book deserves a cocktail. And this one to me deserved a very, very special cocktail. So there's a kind of a story that goes behind this cocktail. We were at a bar in Little Rock, and I was sitting there, and at the behind the bar, I saw Delta Dirt, and it is from Arkansas, and it's made with sweet potatoes. And I was like, you know what? I don't know what to do with this. I have it in my home bar, and so I went up to the bartender and I said, "What would you do with this Delta Dirt?" And he goes, honestly, I don't even know. So he took a swig of it and he rattled off this cocktail. And I went back and sat at my table, and I thought, oh my gosh, this would be perfect for my book because the women in this book harvest sweet potatoes. And the book that I'm talking about is called The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C. And y'all, I'm here to tell you that this book is like this cocktail. It's got a lot of layers to it. It's got the sweet potato vodka, it's got St. Germain's, it has strawberry simple syrup, which I made, some lemon juice, and then ginger beer just to brighten it up and give it a little tart and tangy and bubbles. And I love bubbles. So I'm going to call this the Sweet Haenyeo, and it is named after this book. So, yay. Mm. Okay, so let's talk about this book. This book is about Korean diving women, and they are Hanoi women, and they live on the island of Jeju. And it's historically written, this book, about these women that are divers. So, the first element of this book that really threw me off was that the gender roles are completely reversed in this community. And meaning the women go out and work the land, and the land being the ocean and the land. So they dive into the ocean and they harvest what they can in the ocean, bring it up, and then when they can't harvest for weather or whatever, then they go on the land and harvest, at the time, sweet potatoes. The men, on the other hand, stay at home and they raise the babies. They are the head of the household, and they are even the political heads. And this is just for this one certain island in Korea. So they are under Confucius law. And so the men are the intelligent ones. They're the ones that get to go to school. And the women are the ones that bring home the money. And it started, I can't remember exactly the date that it started, but it started because it said that the women had more visceral fat on their bodies. And so they could handle the elements of the weather better in the water and everything else. So this whole culture is built around these women, and they're called Hanoi women that dive. So the book goes back and forth. They're telling the story of these two women, Young Soo and let's see, Maya and Young Suk. And Young Suk is actually from this culture, and Miye is a niece of one of the women that lives in this group of women. And so they become friends. And so it tells the stories of these women that dive for food for their families and also to bring in the money for their families. And so you follow these two young girls, and they're just wonderful friends. And but with this culture, um, the men, like I said before, the men get to go to school. The women are the ones that make the money. So the in one regard, these men are lifted up, and you want to have male babies in your family, but you also want to have all these women in your family because they're the ones that make the money for the family. And my head just spun because we know, as in our culture, that that just wouldn't fly. I mean, it did for a long time, but the men were the ones that went out. And so these women sit around and after they work so hard, then they talk about their husbands being lazy and they're drunkards. And so it just really frustrated me that these women work so hard and the men spent the money on alcohol. And they talked about having, little wives, so they took on different wives to have more of money in the family. So I could go on and on and on about the family because it just absolutely blew my mind. The other thing is this friendship, and what the friendship brought to this book was so poignant because it was set in the 19, well, it kind of came to head in 1948. And it was between the World War II, and the Korean War. And it was the uprising of 1948, Jeju uprising of 1948. And it was these people that were rising up against what America was bringing in, and the Korean people wanted to be their own people. And it was a very big slaughter of the Korean people. And these two girls are right in the middle of it. And what you have to know is that Young Suk stayed with the Hanoi culture, and she was taken into, another group of women because she had to leave when she got married. Her husband actually was a teacher, so he was one of the men that actually taught, and he wanted his girls to go to school. And Young Suk was like, "No, that's not right. The boys will go to school. The girls will work with me." Blah blah blah. And so then you have, Mi Yang or Mi Ya, and she has been raised in the Japanese culture, and so she ends up, marrying this man, and he becomes a part of the government, and so they look down on the Hanoi people and this uprising that happens, and so there's a big. It comes to a head between these two girls, friends, and it is heartbreaking. And as I looked at the story, and the story is really told by Young Suk, and so you hear her side of the story, and you really don't hear, um, Misha's side of the story until the end of the book. And you know, you look at this friendship, and um, it just is heartbreaking. And what's really heartbreaking is when you learn the truth from both women, how history can play such a big part in our lives and when we don't even know it. And how when we don't say what's true, what's really going on, where Min Yang, she could not tell, Young Suk exactly what was going on in her home behind closed doors. And Young Suk, because of the tragedy that happened in her family, she couldn't see beyond herself to see what was happening in her friend's life. And y'all, I'm telling you, I have sat on this book for about 3 weeks now. And every time I go back to look at my notes or reread a passage or something, it just dawns on me that something else is going on. One thing I do want to say about these women, the Hanoi women, they gave birth in the water. They lived in the water. They looked at the water as their mother. It could provide for them, but it was also, destroyed them. And they have dove into this water so much, and They would risk their lives to go and get the most profitable thing in the ocean. And it put their lives in jeopardy. Even the cold water put their lives in jeopardy. And they still chose to do it. And it was in their blood to do it. And that fascinated me, how that they could just go ahead and, after tragedy, just keep going back into the water. And I thought about grief and how they dealt with grief, and how, they were said, or how we say, oh, she's such a strong woman. But back then, it was almost a forced survival for them. And for most of the women that we know, especially the older women that we know as strong women, and they faced these things, or they didn't show their emotions when their children died, or didn't talk about when their children died, it was almost a forced survival on them. A lot of them, especially these Hanoi women, because if they were not in the ocean, they were not providing for their families. And a lot of them had 6 and 7 children to provide for. And then also for their husband, too, because he did not bring home any money. So it was definitely a survival part for them. This book was so good. I got so frustrated with it, and I got so in love with it. It was a very solid book for me. Solid 4.5 um, B's to put this cocktail to it. It kind of rose to the top, because I was like, oh my gosh, here is something that we grow in Arkansas. They have used the sweet potato to make this beautiful product. And so it tied it all together for me. And I realized that there is a big tie of cultures. These women work so hard, our women work hard. And so I just really, really encourage everyone to read this book, because it was something I had never heard about. And that's one of the things about historical fiction that I love so much, is to learn about things that I knew nothing of. And so this is a beautiful, beautiful book. So thank you very much. I'm Dana B, and this is Boozy Bee's Books, Cocktails, and some basketball. I didn't even talk about the basketball. The NBA final playoffs are going on. So cheers and thunder up.
Cheers!